I went to buy her a cake. Instead, I found proof my marriage was over. What came after nearly destroyed me. I found out my wife was cheating on me while I was standing in a grocery store bakery, arguing with a teenager about frosting colors. That's the part my brain still replays in slow motion. Not the big dramatic confrontation, not the bags by the door later, but me in a fluorescent-lit aisle, holding my phone in one hand and a sample of chocolate cake in the other, feeling the floor tilt under my feet. The kid behind the counter was asking, "So, do you want happy birthday, Emily, in blue or red?" And I remember staring at my phone, at the message on the screen, and thinking, neither. I want my life back in one piece. Let me back up a little. If you looked at our life from the outside, you'd think we had figured it out. We were the kind of couple people used as an example at cookouts. Those two, they built everything themselves. No help from anyone. And it was true. We started with a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like the neighbor's cooking and the old carpet never quite got clean. We shared a car so rusty the floorboards rattled whenever I hit a pothole. She'd pack my lunch in an old plastic container with my name on a piece of tape because we didn't want to lose them at work. We climbed, together. Long hours, second jobs, weekends we spent doing our own repairs instead of hiring anyone. Over time, that tiny apartment turned into a starter house. Then the starter house turned into our house. The one with the tree in the front yard where we hung Christmas lights, the garage full of tools and bikes, the kitchen table carved up with school projects and late-night bills. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and we raised them on hand-me-down clothes and big dreams. I remember standing on the sidelines of their games, shoulder to shoulder with her, coffee in a paper cup, cheering until my voice went raw. We were tired, always tired, but it felt like a good kind of tired, like we were pouring ourselves into something that mattered. Somewhere along the way, we made it. Not rich, not what you see in movies, but we had what we'd always wanted. A paid-off house, 2 decent cars, kids in college, a little money in savings. I'd look at her across the couch at night, her feet tucked under a blanket, laptop open, glasses sliding down her nose, and feel this quiet, grateful warmth. We did it. We did it. If you'd pulled our family Christmas photo from the fridge and asked me to circle the person who would one day blow it all up, I would have circled my own face every time. I knew my flaws. I was stubborn, I worked too much, I shut down when I was stressed. But her? She was the steady one. The glue. At least that's what I thought. The first sign that something was off was so small I almost ignored it. She started guarding her phone. Not in an obvious way, nothing you could point to and say, "There, that's it." Just little things. Screen tilted away from me on the couch. Phone face down on the table. Laughing at something and then clicking out of it when I walked into the room. "Work stuff," she said when I asked. "You don't want to see these emails. They're boring." And I believed her. Because for nearly 25 years, believing her was the safest place in the world. Then she started staying later at the office. "Deadlines," she said. "New system. New manager. You know how it goes." I did know how it went. I'd done my fair share of late nights too. So I told myself I was being paranoid when my stomach twisted at the way she smiled at her screen. You don't want to think that about the person you built your life with. You don't even want to open that door in your mind. So I closed it. Hard. Until that afternoon in the grocery store. I had taken off early to surprise her. I was going to get her favorite cake, pick up the fancy candles, cook dinner, and have the whole family over. A small thank you for everything she'd carried on her shoulders all these years. The bakery kid had just asked me what to write on the cake when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our mobile carrier, one of those "your bill is ready" emails. Right under it, in the preview, I saw something else. A number I didn't recognize. A lot of messages. All late at night. I don't know why I clicked it. I almost didn't. But I opened the app, scrolled to our usage details, and there it was. A number that showed up night after night. Long calls. Texts that started the second she got off work and didn't stop until after midnight. I typed the number into a search bar, and a man's name popped up. Someone I had met once, in passing, at her office holiday party. The kid at the counter cleared his throat. "Sir? Blue or red?" I stared at the phone, at this stranger's name, and something in me went very, very still. Actually, I heard myself say, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else, "I need a minute." I stepped away from the counter, heart pounding, cake order forgotten. Right there, between the birthday cakes and the muffin display, I realized my marriage might not be what I thought it was. I left the cake sitting on the counter, walked out of the store with nothing in my hands and too much in my chest. Questions piling up, that cold, hollow feeling spreading out under my ribs. I sat in my truck, shut the door, and just stared at that number on my phone like I could will it into being harmless. A wrong number, a group chat, spam, anything. But it stayed what it was. His name, his number, over and over, late at night, on weekends, while I was asleep 10 feet away. I kept telling myself there had to be some other explanation. Work issue, big project, somebody going through a rough time and leaning on her. She was kind. She cared about people. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with her. So I built stories in my head, one on top of another, piling them between us like sandbags against a rising river. But the water kept coming. Without really deciding to, I started the engine and drove to her office. I couldn't have told you why in that moment. Maybe it was habit. I used to swing by sometimes to take her to lunch. Maybe it was that part of you that needs to see the wound instead of just feeling the pain. Either way, I ended up in the lot across the street, sitting low in my seat like some second-rate detective. Her car was there. Another car was there. I knew it instantly, the same one Head bragged about at the holiday party while I stood there, drink in hand, nodding along. I could still feel the handshake, still hear myself saying, "Thanks for looking out for her at work." The memory made my stomach knot. Around 6, they walked out. They didn't come out in a group. It was just the two of them. She had that light in her eyes, the one I used to think I'd earned, the one I thought belonged to us. She said something, nudged his arm with her shoulder. He leaned toward her just a little, like Head done it 100 times. They weren't holding hands. They weren't doing anything that would catch a stranger's eye. But when you've watched someone for decades, you know the small things. The way she tilted her head toward him. The way he hovered, not too close, not too far. Two people who'd forgotten to pretend they were just co-workers. He brushed her arm when they stopped by her car. His hand stayed there a second too long. She looked up at him with this soft, open face I knew by heart. I'd seen that look before. On our wedding day, I wanted to get out. I wanted to walk over there, say his name, say hers, drag it all into the light. Instead, I sat frozen, fingers locked around my phone so tight my knuckles ached. She finally got into her car and drove off, turning toward home like it was any other ordinary evening. Like nothing had shifted. Like she wasn't leaving me behind in a parking lot full of proof. I watched her taillights disappear, then gave myself a few minutes, 10, maybe more, before I followed. The drive home felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life through a windshield. I passed houses with porch lights on, families setting tables, kids' bikes tossed in yards. Normal. Every day. Meanwhile, I was rehearsing words that tasted like gravel in my mouth. Are you seeing someone else? When I walked through the door, she was at the counter, chopping vegetables like the world was exactly as we'd left it that morning. She glanced up, smiling. Hey, you're home early. Early. The word hit me sideways. It felt less like I was early and more like I was arriving late to a truth everyone else had already seen. I set my keys down carefully so they wouldn't rattle. We need to talk. She paused. Just a beat. Then her face smoothed over, like she'd flipped a switch. Okay, about what? I took out my phone, opened the call history, and held the screen toward her. This number, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Him. All the color drained from her face at once. Her hand tightened around the knife. Then, very slowly, she put it down on the cutting board. I can explain, she whispered. I'd heard those words from other people's stories, the kind you listen to and hope you never have to tell yourself. They landed in our kitchen like a lead weight. How long? I asked. My throat burned. Just how long? She stared at the half-cut pepper in front of her. like the answer might be hiding in the seeds. A few months. The room tilted. A few months. Through holidays. Through family dinners. Through nights we'd fallen asleep back to back. Me thinking we were just tired. Her phone glowing on the nightstand. Did you? I stopped myself. I didn't want the play-by-play. I didn't want new images I'd never be able to get rid of. I only needed the bare truth. She gave it anyway. A tiny nod. Eyes wet. Yes. The silence that followed felt louder than any argument. The clock on the wall ticked like it was mocking me. The fridge hummed. A car drove past outside, tires hissing on the pavement. Ordinary sounds, all of them. Nothing in the world announced that my life had just split into before and after. Why? I finally managed. It wasn't a shout. It was barely a question. Just a broken piece of air. She started talking about feeling lonely, about us drifting, about stress and timing and how she hadn't gone looking for it, how it just happened. There were apologies tangled in there, excuses, regret. I heard phrases I'd heard in movies. I never meant to hurt you. It was a mistake. I still love you. But my mind had gone somewhere else. It was walking through our years together, room by room. The tiny apartment with the second-hand couch. The nursery we painted yellow because we didn't know the baby's gender. The kitchen table covered in bills and college brochures. All the times we had chosen each other on purpose. And then this, the night she hadn't. I wish I could tell you I stayed calm and wise and measured. I didn't. My voice shot up. I said harsh things I can't take back. She sobbed and reached for me, but I stepped away like her touch might burn through. Don't, I said. Just don't. There was no shattered glass, no overturned chairs. No thunderstorm pounding on the windows. Just two middle-aged people in a too-bright kitchen. The smell of onions in the air. Nearly 3 decades of life together suddenly feeling like something delicate someone had dropped. Eventually, the words ran out. We stood there breathing, both of us staring at different spots on the floor, like eye contact might make it worse. My chest ached. My head throbbed. I felt older than I had that morning by years. I can't, I said at last, barely louder than a breath. I don't know how to come back from this. She opened her mouth, maybe to bargain, maybe to beg. You'll never know, because I reached for my keys instead. And that's how I walked out of my own home as if I didn't belong there anymore. Her voice calling my name behind me. My hand on the doorknob, no plan, no map, just the sinking realization that this wasn't an argument we'd patch up. This was the part where my whole life broke open. I drove without knowing where I was going. I just remember turning right out of our neighborhood instead of left, like I always did. Left was work. Left was gym, grocery store, the life we had built. Right was nothing. A strip of highway, cheap motels, gas stations, that one diner we'd always joked looked too sketchy to try. I ended up in that diner. I sat in a cracked vinyl booth with a coffee I didn't want, staring at the steam. My phone buzzed over and over on the table, her name lighting up the screen, then our daughters, then our sons. I watched it vibrate until the battery got low and the screen went dark. The waitress came by twice before she finally asked, "You okay?" "Honey?" I lied. "Yeah, just tired. That first night, I slept in the truck." It wasn't some noble choice. Every hotel I passed felt too bright, too clean, like I'd have to explain myself at the front desk. "Hi, yeah, I just found out my wife isn't really my wife anymore. Can I get a non-smoking room with a side of my entire identity?" So I reclined the seat in a grocery store parking lot and stared at the ceiling. A security light flickered across the windshield. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I finally broke and started crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent tears that soaked into the collar of my shirt. I was in my 50s and I felt about 7. By morning, my back hurt and my head felt full of sand. I washed my face in the bathroom of the store, looked at myself in the mirror under that awful fluorescent light, and barely recognized the man staring back. Same guy, same wrinkles, same gray at the temples, but something behind the eyes was gone. Or maybe it was just cracked. I didn't go home. Instead, I called our son. "Dad?" He answered, voice thick with sleep. "Mom's been calling me. Is everything okay?" "No," I said. The word came out flat. "Your mom and I were having some problems." I just need you to know I'm okay. I just need some time. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. Do I need to come over? No. The thought of them there, in that house, in the middle of all that broken glass, I couldn't do that to them. Just check on your mom. Okay? I could tell he wanted more. He was his mother's son that way, always wanting to fix, to smooth. But I didn't have anything else to give, so we said goodbye. The next few days blurred. I rented a room in one of those long-term stay places off the highway. Beige walls, plastic cups by the sink, a bed that squeaked every time I turned over. I went to work, came home, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the TV without really watching anything. She kept calling. She sent long messages, apologies, explanations, promises to end it with him, to go to counseling, to do whatever it took. Sometimes I read them. Sometimes I didn't. Every word felt like someone poking at an open wound. Our daughter showed up once. I heard a knock, opened the door, and there she was, eyes red, hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Dad?" She whispered, and just like that I had her in my arms and we were both crying. She didn't defend her mother, not really. She also didn't attack her. She just kept saying, "I don't know how to do this. You two were supposed to be the solid ones." I wanted to be strong for her. Instead, I sat on the edge of that cheap hotel bed with my grown child and admitted I didn't know how to do this either. At some point, practical life barged back in. There were bills to pay, a mortgage with both our names on it, shared accounts, insurance. Sitting at my desk at work, I Googled divorce lawyers with shaking hands. The word looked wrong on the screen, like it belonged to other people. We met once, my wife and I, at a coffee shop to talk logistics. She looked smaller somehow, like the guilt had shrunk her. She kept twisting her ring around and around. "I ended it," she said as soon as we sat down. "With him. It's over." I nodded, but it was like hearing someone say they'd shut the barn door after the horses were already gone and the barn had burned down. She talked about therapy, about healing, about maybe living apart for a while and then seeing where we landed. I listened, but there was this cold, clear place inside me that had made a decision. "I can't unknow it," I said quietly. "I can't unsee what I saw. I don't know how to be your husband and carry this." Her eyes filled, and for a second I almost wavered. This was the woman I'd built a life with. The mother of my kids. The person who knew how I took my coffee, which knee hurt in the winter, what song made me tear up every time. But then I thought of that parking lot, of her laughing up at him, of all those late-night calls. Some doors, once you walk through them, don't lead back. "I think we need to let this go," I said. My voice shook. "For real. Lawyers, papers, the whole thing." She covered her mouth with her hand like she'd been slapped. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "Are you sure?" No. I wasn't sure about anything. I just knew that every time I imagined staying, I couldn't breathe. "Yeah," I said. "I'm sure enough." That night, back in the motel room, I signed the first stack of documents my lawyer had emailed. Electronic signature. Click, click, click. Almost insultingly easy, considering what it meant. Afterward, I sat in the dim light with my laptop closed on my knees, staring at nothing. That's when the quiet really settled in. The calls slowed down. The texts became fewer. The house, my house, became her house on paper. Our bank accounts split, our retirement divided, our life sorted into columns. And me? I started to sink. I went to work. I answered questions. I nodded in meetings. But once I shut my office door, or got back to that room with its humming mini fridge and worn-out carpet, it was just me and a darkness I didn't know how to climb out of. People think the worst part is the moment you find out. They're wrong. The worst part is the long, empty stretch after, when the shock wears off and you're left with the simple, heavy fact. This is your life now, and you have no idea what to do with it. Depression, for me, didn't look like lying in bed all day. It looked like doing everything I was supposed to do with the volume turned all the way down. I got up. I showered. I went to work. I answered emails. I said, "Good. How are you?" In the hallway. I laughed in the right places. But underneath all of that, there was this constant gray hum, like a TV left on in an empty room. Nights were the worst. In the motel, the walls were thin. ID hear someone's TV next door, muffled arguments, a baby crying somewhere down the hall. ID lay there and scroll through photos on my phone. Vacations, birthdays, that picture of her asleep on the couch with our son as a baby sprawled across her chest. I should have deleted them. Couldn't. Felt like erasing history. After a while, my body started keeping score. I stopped sleeping more than a couple hours at a time. My appetite went weird. Either nothing sounded good or I ate junk just to feel something. My chest would get tight out of nowhere. I'd be sitting at a red light and suddenly my heart would start pounding like I was running a race. One afternoon, it got bad enough that I ended up in the ER. I thought I was having a heart attack. Turned out to be a panic attack. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, asked, "You under any stress lately?" I almost laughed. "Yeah, you could say that." She suggested therapy, gave me a card, told me I didn't have to white-knuckle my way through this. I stuck the card in my wallet and did what men in my generation are champions at. I ignored it. A few weeks later, our daughter cornered me. We were having lunch, just the two of us, at this little place we used to go to after her soccer games. She watched me pick at my sandwich, watched me flinch when a song came on the radio that reminded me of her mother, and finally she set her fork down. "Dad," she said, "you're not okay." "I'm fine." "You're not. You're disappearing." I wanted to argue, but I saw it in her face. That mix of hit me then. My pain wasn't just mine. It was bleeding onto them. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "This is a therapist. My friend went to her after her divorce. Will you at least call?" I stared at the paper for a long time. Something inside me, some stubborn voice, said real men deal with their problems on their own. Another voice, quieter but steadier, said, "You tried that. Look where it got you." So I called. Therapy wasn't some magic spell. I didn't walk in broken and walk out whole. It was more like someone turning on a light in a cluttered garage. The mess was all still there, but at least I could see it. I talked about the betrayal, of course. But I also talked about things I hadn't expected. My father leaving when I was young, the way I'd always taken pride in being the steady one, how much of my identity was wrapped up in being a husband and dad. "That's the thing about earthquakes," my therapist said once. "They don't just knock down the house. They shake the foundation. You're not just grieving your marriage. You're grieving the version of yourself that lived inside it." Slowly, painfully, I started doing small things for myself. I took walks after work instead of sitting in the dark. I picked up an old hobby, woodworking, in a cramped little rented garage. I grabbed coffee with a coworker instead of going straight back to the motel. Tiny steps, barely noticeable from the outside, but inside they felt like learning to walk again. The divorce finalized. Papers signed, names changed, accounts moved. The world didn't end. No thunder, no lightning. Just a courthouse clerk handing me a folder and saying, "You're all set," like Shed just helped me renew a driver's license. For a long time, I wanted nothing to do with dating. The idea of opening myself up to someone again felt like standing in the middle of a highway and hoping not to get hit. But life has a way of sneaking in through side doors. For me, it came through a broken dishwasher. ID finally moved out of the motel and into a small rental house. Nothing fancy, a little yard, a creaky porch, a kitchen that looked straight out of the 90s. The dishwasher died one night with a horrible grinding sound and a smell like burning plastic. I called the handyman number on the fridge. She showed up the next afternoon. Her name was Claire. She was a friend of the landlord, mid-40s, worn baseball cap, hair pulled back, a smudge of something on her cheek. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to take things apart and put them back together. While she worked under the counter, we talked. At first about nothing, appliances, the age of the house, the weather. Then somehow, without meaning to, I mentioned my ex. She slid out from under the sink, wiped her hands on a rag, and said softly, "Yeah, same here." It turned out she'd been through her own version of heartbreak a few years earlier. Different details, same hollowed-out feeling. We compared notes like survivors of the same storm. When she left, the kitchen felt different. Lighter. A week later, she texted to ask if the dishwasher was still working. I said yes. Then, before I could overthink it, I added, "Also, if you ever want to grab coffee sometime, I owe you at least that much for saving me from washing dishes by hand." There was a long pause. Then, "Coffee sounds nice." I stared at the screen for a while, heart beating too fast. It was just coffee. Just a conversation. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a blank wall. It felt like a door that maybe, just maybe, I could open. Our first coffee turned into a second one without either of us really deciding it. We met at this little place downtown. Real cups, not paper, old music in the background, the kind of spot people bring books they actually read. I got there early, because that's what I do, and sat by the window watching people go by. When Claire walked in, she didn't glide or float or any of that nonsense people write in romance novels. She walked like a regular person, checking the door twice like maybe she was wondering if this was a bad idea. I remember feeling strangely comforted by that. We were both nervous. We were both out of practice. The conversation was easy. Not perfect, not smooth. We stumbled, we laughed at the wrong moments. We both tripped over how to talk about our previous lives without sounding bitter. But there was something gentle about it. No pressure to impress. No pretending to be less wounded than we were. We talked about work, about our kids, about the weird quiet of going home to a place that didn't hold your history. We talked about learning how to cook for one. We joked about YouTube tutorials being our new best friends. At one point, she looked at me over her mug and said, "Sometimes I feel like my life exploded and then quietly rearranged itself when I wasn't looking." "Yeah," I said. "I know that feeling." We didn't make any big promises that day. We just agreed to meet again. Weeks turned into months. Coffee turned into walks, then dinners, then weekend afternoons wandering hardware stores and thrift shops. It wasn't some wild, head-over-heels thing. It was slower, steadier. Two people moving carefully around each other's scars. There were moments I pulled back. First time she reached for my hand in public, my chest tightened and I had to swallow the urge to yank it away. Not because I didn't want it, but because some part of me still flinched at the idea of being seen trying again. Of inviting the universe to take another swing. She noticed. She always noticed. "It's okay," she'd say softly. "We can go as slow as you need." Nobody had ever said that to me before. Not really. Therapy helped too. I kept going, kept untying knots I didn't know I had. I talked about the guilt of moving on, about the way I still checked my phone, sometimes expecting a text from my ex, even though there was no reason for her to reach out anymore. My therapist didn't tell me to stop feeling guilty. She just kept asking, "Does this guilt help you build the kind of life you want next?" The answer was always no. My relationship with the kids shifted, but it held. They visited me at the little rental, then later, the house I bought with a backyard big enough for a grill and folding chairs. They met Claire slowly, first in a group setting, then one-on-one. She didn't try to be their mother. She just showed up, listened, asked questions, remembered small details. Over time, I watched their shoulders relax around her. My ex-wife, well, we stayed mostly on opposite sides of a thin, polite wall. Necessary texts about holidays, updates about the kids, the occasional practical question about paperwork. Her messages were short now. No more long apologies. Just facts. I heard through our daughter that things weren't going great for her. The affair that blew us up didn't turn into some grand love story. Fizzled. She was living alone in the house we'd once filled with noise. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. I didn't. If anything, it just made me sad. Sad for the version of us that might have grown old on that porch together. Sad for the woman who'd once been my partner in every sense of the word. Choices have ripples. Hers were still catching up to her. The last time I saw her in person outside of a quick, awkward handoff was at the grocery store. Fitting, I guess. Full circle. I was there with Claire arguing about which brand of salsa was the good kind when I heard my name. I turned, and there she was, holding a basket with a few lonely items in it. She looked smaller, tired, older than I remembered, even though not that much time had passed. For a second, all three of us just stood there, past and present in the same aisle. "Hi," my ex said finally. "Hey," I replied. My voice came out gentle, which surprised me. We exchanged small talk, kids, work, weather. Nobody said the word divorce. Nobody mentioned the crater we'd climbed out of. Claire was kind but kept a respectful distance, like she understood this moment belonged mostly to history. As we said goodbye, my ex looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or just the realization that the life we had was truly gone, not paused. "You look good," she said quietly. "So do you." I lied, and I meant it in the way you mean it when you're not talking about looks at all. Walking back to the car, Claire slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. Really thought about it. "Yeah," I said. And for the first time since my world cracked open in a grocery store bakery, it felt mostly true. Not perfect, not healed all the way true, but enough. A year later, I married Claire. It wasn't a big wedding, just family, a few close friends, a rented barn strung with lights. Our kids stood up beside us. I stumbled over my vows because my throat kept tightening, not with fear this time, but with the shock of being given a second chance I never thought I'd want. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I caught sight of my son in the front row, wiping his eyes. My daughter was fully crying, no attempt to hide it. Later she hugged me and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't give up on love, Dad." The thing is, I had given up. For a while, I really had. I'd decided that part of my life was over, that my story had peaked with the first marriage and everything after was just epilogue. But standing there with Claire's hand in mine, laughing as someone's little kid ran across the dance floor, I realized something. Life doesn't care how neat you want the chapters to be. It will rip pages out, spill coffee on your favorite parts, and write whole new scenes in the margins. My ex didn't come to the wedding. I didn't expect her to. Later, I heard Shed move to a smaller place, still by herself. The kids visited when they could, but they came back heavy, the way people do after sitting in a house where the air is thick with all the things no one wants to say. I don't wish her misery. I really don't. I hope, in some quiet way, she finds her own version of peace. But her story isn't mine to tell anymore. Mine is this. I loved one woman for a long time. We built a life from scratch. She broke my trust and I broke apart. I walked away because staying would have meant losing myself completely. I fell into a darkness I didn't think had an exit. And then, slowly, stubbornly, with help I didn't want at first, I climbed out. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. I opened my heart again when every scared part of me said not to. I let someone new love me, not as the man I used to be, but as the man I am now. Cracked, a little cautious, but still capable of showing up. If there's any lesson in all of this, it's not some movie line about everything happening for a reason. I don't know if I believe that. What I do believe is this. People will fail you. Sometimes the ones you trust the most. But their choices don't get to be the final word on your life. You can draw a line. You can say, "This hurt me and am still worthy of something good." You can start over at 50 or 60, or whenever the ground gives way under your feet. You can stand in a grocery store one day, staring at a text that shatters your world, and years later, walk those same aisles with someone new, picking out birthday cake frosting, realizing that somehow, against all odds, your heart kept beating, and that it's still capable of choosing.